U.S. President Donald Trump is signaling that Canada's lumber and forest products industry could be hit with tariffs. For the first time, Trump is talking about slapping a 25% levy on all U.S. lumber imports as early as April.
Or any
forest products, yeah.
And do you have a rate in mind for that?
No, but we're thinking about maybe 25%.
And would that also be April 2nd?
In that vicinity, yeah, a little bit later.
Trump was speaking to reporters on his return to Washington last night. Canada is the biggest supplier of lumber and forest products to the U.S. Meanwhile, a new poll from Leger is giving a snapshot of how Canadians view their American neighbors. The poll suggests 27% of Canadians see the U.S. as an enemy country, while another 30% still consider the United States as an ally. Finally, another 27% of people surveyed say they consider our southern neighbors to be a neutral country. The Leger poll was conducted online over 4 days last week and surveyed 1,500 Canadians and 1,000 Americans. To discuss the findings further, we're now joined by Steve Mossop. He is the Executive Vice President of Leger, and he's in our Vancouver studio. So, Steve, overall, what do these findings suggest about Canada's stance towards the United States?
Well, it's really a first in the polling industry for us. I mean, we've never had to frame a poll in this context before. You know, we've always asked if people are in favor or opposed to the policies of the USA or how close we are to them. But we've never posed a question of whether we think they're an enemy or not. And so the fact that 27% of Canadians say that they consider the U.S. an enemy is quite remarkable. If you flip that poll around and you look at USA residents, it's only 1%. So very few Americans think that Canada is the enemy. So that's indicative of the one-way nature of this feeling these days.
I mean, the Trumps, but understandable, I guess, on a certain level. The Trumps are coming from Donald Trump, who's threatened who's threatened Canada's sovereignty through economic coercion, the 51st state, the Governor Trudeau comments.
It is, you're right, it is. The framework is been set by Trump a few weeks ago. And if you look at overall approval ratings of Trump in Canada, it's only 13%. And in his first term, it was running around 15 to 20%, depending on what was going on. So it's a marked difference, only half of the numbers we saw 4 or 5 years ago. Conversely, our polls show that in America, we've got about a 51% approval rating for Trump himself. So we're really on different levels how we view his leadership and what he's doing.
And what you also, and tell me more about this, but this is before tariffs have been imposed, right? And we don't know whether tariffs will be imposed, but we know that the threat is there. So do you think there's potential for these kind of, negative feelings about the United States to grow?
I believe so, because it's not just tariffs. We've seen sentiment turn really in anticipation of Trump taking power. For example, we did a travel survey about a year ago that showed Canadians were less likely to travel to the U.S. in the years ahead than they were previously. We now show in our own polls that of Canadians who have actually made plans, about 35% of Canadians who have made plans actually canceled them. And going forward, about 2/3 of Canadians say that they're not going to travel to the USA at all. So the early sentiment did exist, but it's really exacerbated by the threat of the tariffs. And it looks like it's not dissipating anytime soon.
And do you think it's also the kind of the 51st state talk, or I guess you don't know exactly all the reasons, but just this kind of...
It is. I mean, our poll shows that 81% of Canadians are very concerned about the idea that Trump's calling us a 51st state and imposing tariffs. We've also got some actions at a consumer level where consumers are voting with their wallets in a big way. We're changing our shopping patterns. We've got 63% of Canadians who are saying that they're not going to buy USA goods going forward. We've got another 60% who say that they're going to start boycotting American retailers like Walmarts of the world and McDonald's and Starbucks, even down to Netflix streaming services and Amazon Prime. We've got about 20% of Canadians saying that they're going to cancel those. So the intentions are certainly there, and Canadians have bonded together in a way unlike I've ever seen about changing their shopping to punish, in a sense, American policy.
There's some interesting Canadian Party affiliation breakdown in your poll as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
There really is, and we've seen this all along, but it's even more heightened now, and it's not quite as two-party divided as it is in the USA. But for example, on the support levels for Trump, we see that if you're a conservative voter nationally, your approval ratings of Trump are 27%. If you are a Liberal or an NDP voter, the support levels are only 5%. So a marked difference there. There's also a marked difference on the perception of the USA being an enemy. If we look at Conservative voters, not so much so, but it's about double or even triple the level among Liberal voters. So we certainly see that partisan divide in the polling numbers.
Do any trends in the data suggest potential long-term impacts in Canada-U.S. relations?
There is, because it's not just tariffs. You know, if you look at the policies of Trump when it comes to immigration, when it comes to LGBTQ community, if you look at just the overall policies that have gone the direction that it has, Canadians don't align with those. So if the tariff issue disappears or lessens, I think we'll see a slight lessening of anti-American sentiment, but I don't think it's going away. I think it's here for at least the time that Trump is in term.
Are you shocked by some of the findings? I guess the headline is the 27% as an enemy country. So it's not just Trump, it's the United States. And are people kind of conflating the two because he is the president, because he has such a prominent, he's such a prominent figure in the news these days?
It is more than just Trump. You're right, it's broadened out to America. And like I said, in polling that I've seen, I've never seen quite a rallying cry. We've measured also patriotism in Canada. We're not an overly patriotic country relative to the USA, but the numbers suggest that we're more patriotic than ever. We're more bound together. There's something like 75% who say that they would support counter-tariff measures, dollar for dollar, towards the USA. We've got 81% solidarity on the direction Canada is going and dealing with the tariffs. So it is bringing us together unlike we've ever seen before. And as I mentioned, the shopping behavior, the numbers are high. You know, we're not talking about a minority. We're talking about nearly every Canadian is changing something about their purchase patterns to do something individually to counter these measures.
Steve, thank you. Steve Mossop, he is the Executive Vice President for Leger, and he joined us from Vancouver.